Good morning and welcome to Hope, Faith, and Joy Daily Devotion with me, Pastor Amanda. Today we are diving into the Gospel of Mark and the chapter 9. And what we kind of dive into is the transfiguration. So this is the time in which Jesus goes on top of the mountain and he takes his small group. He doesn't take everybody. He just takes three of his closest disciples. And I mean, this is not even the whole group of disciples. Just these three go up to the mountain and we have this wonderful encounter between Jesus and God. And God reiterates the baptismal covenant in a sense with Jesus, and he says, "This is my son, the beloved." But he says something a little bit extra in here, and God says, "Listen to him." Now, if we think back to yesterday's scripture, Peter has heard Jesus speak about his death, and then he says, "No, that's not going to happen." And God's saying, Peter, you kind of need to start listening a little more intently to what he is saying. And so we have this moment in which God is just reinforcing what is being taught to the disciples. And so after that, they discover that they have to go back down the mountain to continue to do some ministry. And they come into this experience with a boy who he's filled with convulsing. He gets rigid. All this stuff is going on. And some people are arguing together around this boy and his father. And so Jesus kind of says, "What's going on here? What's happening?" And the father says that I asked for your disciples to help, and they couldn't do it. And Jesus kind of goes on this little tirade. And in verse 19, he says, "You faithless generation, how much longer must I be among you? How much longer must I put up with you? Bring him to me." And so we have this moment in which he recognized, I think what I hear in this is that just because we say that we're a follower of Jesus, just because we doesn't mean our heart is fully there. That's where the faithless comes on. You're doing the actions, but you don't have it in your heart. So you're incapable of doing the healing that Jesus is doing because your heart's not in it. Your actions might be there, but your heart's not in it. And as we discover through and through, Jesus says you have to have both. Your heart and your actions have to be in tune with one another. And so what we find next is that Jesus asks another question of the Father. It's not like an immediate healing. He goes, "How long has this been happening to him?" And the Father says, "Since childhood." And he says, "Please have pity on us and help us if you are able." That's what the Father says, "if you are able." And Jesus says, "if you are able," cops another attitude. I love Mark. Jesus has such attitude in Mark. And he says, "if you are able, all things can be done for the one who believes." So now all of a sudden, it's back in the Father's court. And we have this line that we use all the time. And it is so poignant. And the Father says, "I do believe, help my unbelief." I think we all need to take a step back when we hear that. So many people will say that they live by their faith, that their faith is so strong, that it's all worked out. But if we're really honest with ourselves, there's some part of us that questions or it worries or something. There's always some part that's just not quite there. And there's this continual need to asking, "Help my unbelief." And so it's the humility, the vulnerability that this father shares, that he goes, if there's any part of me that's not there, help me with it. And Jesus definitely he does. He rebukes the spirit. But I find it also interesting, always as I do, is that immediately after this particular healing, people thought that the boy was dead. It says that his body goes rigid, and he's not, like, people are like, oh, this isn't good. This turned out wrong. And it takes a while for the boy to come around. And I think that teaches us a lot. Sometimes miracles have happened, but it takes a while for them to kick in or come around, or there's still a little bit more that needs to be done. And but I think about the transformation process, because I can remember in my own depression how I had to seek counselors. For a while I had to take medication. I had to change the way I eat, the way I exercise. So much took place, and yet I was experiencing the healing and that I was coming out of the depression. But it took a long time to actually be out of it. But that's my miracle, that I don't struggle with it the way I used to struggle with it. I'm much stronger, and I have all my safety nets in place. But here it goes to show that, and for a moment they thought this boy was dead, but it just took a little longer for the miracle to kick in. They kind of thought it got worse before it got better. So I think we can all kind of understand that, relate to that just a little bit. But then we have this kind of interesting thing where the disciples go, why couldn't we do it? Why couldn't we do it? And Jesus, we don't get much more than this, but Jesus says, this kind can come out only through prayer. And as I think about that at a deeper level, what I'm hearing Jesus say is that this is one of those things that really only God could take care of. There's no human, it's like God, you have to have this relationship with God, and that this is beyond a common disciple's abilities, which is in some ways kind of helpful too. It reminds us that even when we are being good, faithful disciples in ministry and trying to help people, sometimes it's beyond our ability. It's not our job. It's not our ministry. It's God's. And only through prayer would we know how to hand that over to God and stop trying to be the one to fix it and hand it over to God. And so through prayer, we would understand that it was not our work to do. But you can only do that when you pray on a regular basis and have that connection. So it's kind of a deep scripture. You could spend a lot more time in that one. Then Jesus continues in verse 30 to tell about his death and resurrection. And of course, his disciples continue to misunderstand. They start fighting over who's going to be the best and who's going to be number one. And he tells them, come on, it's about those who are in service to others, those who care for other people that are going to have this happen. And I think it's interesting too. I'm going to try to kind of keep shorter today, maybe. We find that somebody else is doing exorcisms in Jesus's name, but he's not one of the followers. And the disciples get upset about this. Now, he's just had who's the greatest of us all, those who are doing God's work. Not you just because you're following me. It's those who are doing God's work that, are, here. And so what he goes in to say is this man, as long as he's doing it in my name, people are learning about me. They're learning about the good news. And so it's fine. You don't have to be going to the same denomination of church. You don't have to be exactly in my private group to be the one to do this. You just have to believe in me, believe in the message, believe in God, and you're getting the good word out there. And that's good. That's good enough. And so we have to kind of relax that everybody has to be in our group to be able to do the good work. And so that's good for us to remember, that as long as you're on the right path, you're going to be doing good work, and you're going to make your heart and your actions will be in the right place, and it'll all work out. So thanks for joining me today. I'll see you tomorrow morning as we look at chapter 10 of the Gospel of Mark.